VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us today on Crosstalk here on the VCY America Network. Well, certainly we are seeing matters before the U.S. Supreme Court take center stage this week. Yesterday, arguments started before the U.S. Supreme Court challenging what is called the Patient Protection and Affordable Healthcare Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. This morning, the United States Supreme Court held its second day of testimony, focusing on whether the individual mandate forcing individuals to purchase health insurance or face fines is constitutional. And tomorrow, the court is going to be hearing arguments regarding the question, if the mandate is found to be unconstitutional, is it severable, meaning will the rest of the law survive? Then tomorrow afternoon, they will be hearing arguments whether the expansion of Medicaid is unconstitutional. Well, here to discuss what is more commonly known as Obamacare and its impact on senior citizens is Daniel Weber, the founder and president of the Association of Mature American Citizens, or for short, AMAC. Dan, nice to have you with us today.
Jim, always a pleasure to be here.
Dan, if you would, give us your observations on this drama that's unfolding this week at the United States Supreme Court.
Well, of course, it is so important what happens with this decision, and the court, recognizing that, has devoted more time to hearing arguments on this issue than in the last 20, 30 years. So they realize this affects all Americans, and, you know, all of your listeners, their health care is at stake. AMAC believes that if they uphold the law as it is, it will be a gigantic expansion of federal power. So we are hopefully praying that this court looks at this argument and says that it is unconstitutional.
When you take a look here at the tenets of Obamacare, and I know that the skeleton was only passed by Congress, and we're seeing page after page after page of rules now coming out pertaining to its implementation and rules governing it. Specifically, what we know now, and we know it changes by the week, but how does Obamacare impact senior citizens?
Well, for example, they have the Independent Payment Advisory Board, and what that board does is it will be a 15-person political appointee board, and they will actually issue regulations and rules to determine what procedures various member of Obamacare can have done. They'll take the authority away from your doctor and impose their own rules. So that's one of the most onerous parts of the entire part of Obamacare.
Now, in regard to this board, the Independent Payment Advisory Board, some have referred to this as a death panel. We know that last week the House had voted 223 to 181 to repeal this board. This is going to no doubt face a very tough fight in the Senate. Does AMAC have concerns regarding this board and the kind of decisions they might make?
Well, it is basically a rationing board. And like you said, some folks, AMAC isn't calling it a death panel, but theoretically it can. And if you go back into, the formation of how this thing all got started, President Obama picked a Dr. Berwick, who actually headed his Obamacare, the whole health plan, for a year, the last year. And what happened was his term ran out because the Senate wouldn't appoint him. But during that year, he tried to put in the same system that he had in his own institute, which was based on a point system. We haven't seen that yet in the rules, but if you read his website, what they favored was a point system where you'd get points assigned against you. For example, if you're older, you get points against you. If you're overweight, points against you. If you have had prior medical conditions, whether it's a heart, cancer, whatever it was, that's against you. If you're on medication, that's against you. And the part that annoys us the most, if you cost the system more, they call it a value-based judgment. If, for example, two people with the same heart disease, they both need heart surgery. Well, if one person has had a knee operation that costs $25,000, and the other person didn't, the person who didn't have the knee operation, they have less points, they would go first. And in a sense, that's how the British system works. They don't have hard and fast points, but they use the same type of outline on who gets first in line. And in America, before Obamacare, we had a very short line, and it covered everybody. And the reason they're creating these rationing lines is to reduce the cost, and we think it's the wrong way to do it.
Does it concern you what kind of rules might be drafted pertaining to this?
It sure does. And people have said, well, I've read Obamacare, and I challenged them. I said, no, you haven't, because you haven't read the rules and regulations, because they haven't finished issuing them. As they begin to issue them, then we begin to find out the true meanings of what and the implications of how much control this whole plan has over on our medical care.
Just like we did in recent weeks with sterilization and abortifacients and the like.
And the alienation of the Catholic Church and, taking away religious rights. It's unbelievable. This is like an octopus with all these tentacles. And I think they made a mistake by going after our first freedom of religion. Not everybody in this country is a Catholic, but after, I heard a minister speaking the other day, and he said, after reading what the government wants to do, I'm a Catholic.
Well, and we've seen Baptist organizations have come out, Lutheran organizations have come out. I mean, it is an affront to those who hold to what the Bible teaches in these regards. Dan, you had mentioned in a news release that Obamacare may collapse under its own weight. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's just an impossibility. A couple of things. We were told it would lower costs. Actually, the president said specifically $2,500, everyone's medical care would go down. So far, we've had an average increase of $1,000. The very fact that the doctors themselves will be paid less, that means we're going to have less doctors. Well, okay, now you start raising the cost of medicine, then you allow employers to opt out and let it go to let the employees be covered by an insurance exchange. The insurance exchange can't support it financially, so that's part of the reason why the whole thing will collapse. It was an ill-conceived. It's like building a building and not having enough strong structure underneath it. We think the building will collapse.
So even if a court does not strike it down, it's going to implode.
Well, it's going to hurt all of the people. And what will happen? What happens after a building collapses? Many people get injured, and this collapse isn't going to take place in one fell swoop. It's going to take place in parts, and as people begin to feel the pain, then we'll realize what's happening. So then you're going to have a constant battle in Congress to correct and to restore some of the older parts of our system that have proven that they work.
Tell us about the Medicare component that's going to be heard tomorrow.
Well, that's the Medicaid.
I'm sorry, Medicaid.
Sure. But the Medicare, well, you mentioned Medicare. I just got to get this in, Jim. Obamacare actually hurts Medicare. When Representative Ryan came out with his plan, they said, he's destroying Medicare. He's pushing Granny off the cliff. The fact of the matter is Obamacare destroyed Medicare by taking out $500 billion and costing 11 million seniors $2,000 a year more, which is what will happen by 2014 if they eliminate Medicare Advantage plans.
I'd like you to address this further because right now, there are all kinds of scare tactics that are being given to seniors if we don't have Obamacare.
Well, the point of the matter is the mass media has been distorting and slanting the information going to the people. That's why Jim Schneider and Crosstalk and Talk Radio are so important to getting the word, getting the truth out to the people.
So we have this Medicaid component. Comment on that tomorrow. What is the specific question on Medicaid?
Well, there's a lot of questions on Medicaid, but basically, can the federal government force the states to pay this terrible burden of financial responsibility?
Dan, you're a seniors organization, AMAC, Association of Mature American Citizens. Didn't another seniors organization, namely that of AARP, endorse Obamacare?
Yes, they did. Unfortunately, they did. And that helped us grow. We were, a number of us that formed AMAC about 5 years ago were upset with the direction of AARP. specifically, AARP gave Harry Belafonte an award, humanitarian award, and he had just come back from Venezuela, where he and Chavez Belafonte said that America was the greatest terrorist nation in the world. So that set us off. And then, AARP had an article one month in their magazine on spiritualism for seniors. And I read it with interest, only to find that what the article was about laying on a table and having crystals put on different parts of your body and burning different kinds of incense and on and on and on. And then at the very end of the article, they said, and of course, for those who want traditional old-fashioned religion, okay, they didn't use the word old-fashioned, but that's what you read into it. He said, there's always Billy Graham.
Wow.
I thought, boy, if that's what, then they have 35 million members, and that's what they think, that their members think about spiritualism.
Yeah, quite a slap in the face.
Oh, boy, I'll say. And that kind of woke us up. And then when they supported Obamacare without even polling their members, another slap in the face. If they had polled their members, Gallup took a poll of people 65 and older, and 85% of those folks said they liked their present medical care before Obamacare.
Well, you're concerned for senior citizens. What is it that AMAC knows that AARP does not know? Because AARP, I mean, are they blind to how this is going to impact senior citizens?
I actually believe AARP's goal is to lower their age to, say, 30. They'll concentrate on the older folks, but they want to open up their ranks to all Americans, and they believe in more government control. They believe in and you could research their articles, in a single-payer medical care system that a government plan would cover everyone. That's what they're striving for. And to me, that takes them from an organization that protects and looks out for seniors to one that is foisting an socialistic viewpoint upon their members.
Daniel Weber is our guest here today on Crosstalk. He's founder and president of the Association of Mature American Citizens, otherwise known as AMAC. Dan, what is your reaction to Justice Kagan not recusing herself from this case?
That's a travesty. We're disappointed. As you know, when she was Solicitor General, she actually wrote opinions favoring Obamacare. And not only that, there's evidence from emails that she basically said hooray when it looked like Obama passed the Congress. So it shows a complete bias. Now, how she can be in favor of and write opinions for things and rationalize it and say, oh, I was only doing that job for the government, I was representing their point of view. Everyone knows it was her point of view. And for her to declare otherwise seems to smack of dishonesty. She should have recused herself. She didn't. Now, if you compare that with Justice Thomas, they said, oh, he should recuse himself. That's a totally different story. It was his wife that was involved, and his legal precedent that says the spouse of a judge or justice does not implicate the justice's opinion. So that's the way it is.
Daniel Weber with us here today on Crosstalk. We're going to come back with more discussions regarding Obamacare's impact on seniors and, of course, the drama unfolding this week in the United States Supreme Court. We'll be back in just 1 minute.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, creation scientist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, do meat-eating animals ever eat plants?
Yes, Chris, they do. Often cat or dog owners notice their pets eat berries or vegetables. They may not always choose to do so, but they can. Even zoo lions during World War II were fed a vegetarian diet. This fits with the biblical idea that all animals were created to be plant eaters. It was only after the curse, after Adam sinned and the wages of sins were pronounced as being death, at which time some animals began to acquire a taste for meat. Today, some of them have their habits so well entrenched that they only eat meat, but under some circumstances they can eat plants. Once again, Chris, we see that the Back to Genesis model, that's the one that handles all the data.
To equip yourself with facts that support your faith, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
You're listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America. Daniel Weber is with us, founder and president of AMAC, and certainly a conservative answer to many compared to the AARP. Daniel, you have a website as well where our listeners can obtain more information?
Sure, we sure do. It's www.amac.us. That's AMAC.us, not .com.
You say in a press release that Obamacare is filled with many dirty little secrets. What are you referring to?
Well, there's several. The Payment Review Board is one. Then we have another board that's intent on cutting doctors' pay. And then there's other boards that are to be appointed by the secretary. In other words, there's more boards that can be appointed. And then we have the secret of the IRS will be privy to how much money we have in our bank accounts.
Well, what's that all about?
Say again?
What is that all about?
Well, what will happen is, in order to determine remember the needs basis, what they call the value?
Yes.
They're going to set up a mechanism where, in order to get their deductibles and co-payments paid, they'll be able to go into your checking account and take the payments directly out. The reason that they claim that they're studying doing that is it will make the cost of servicing the medical care cheaper. If it's all done electronically, they can do away with billing departments. They can directly drain your checking account.
Yeah, at the same time, increase the size and scope of government.
Exactly. But, I mean, imagine that, so you don't have to add anything. We'll take it out of your checking account.
Yeah.
Well, but before they do, they have to check to see that you have enough money in the checking account. So there's dozens and dozens of little things like that they are saying, well, we're not going to do it. It's just like the Catholic Church thing. We're not going to take away your religious rights. And now that's what they told the bishops originally. And now we find out that, oh, yes, we are. And you guys are just going to have to live with it. Or they tell these folks, get out of the insurance business.
Yeah, a new tax reform system. How much did you make last year? Item 2, send it in.
Exactly, right.
Now, we don't know the total outcome of this, of course, because rules are being written, but we understand that the IRS is going to have a huge growing role in all of this.
They're talking about, as you know this, I'm sure, Jim, about appointing 16,000 more investigators to verify mostly employers. In other words, if you have all the employers that are supposed to be covering people in different fashions, the only way you can actually check that, you can't do it by computers. You have to have human beings look at different employers. So they're talking about appointing 16,000 more employees in the IRS alone to verify that the employers follow the plan. And as we mentioned, it's going to collapse. Well, the employers are going to say, I don't need more government interference. I just won't provide the coverage. And then they'll join in this plan that he's put together that's supposed to cover everybody and anybody, which we don't think is going to work.
Now, we certainly don't know the future and how this court's going to rule, but as you've monitored what's happened thus far, you've heard some of the questions that have been asked, and based on what's transpired, are you encouraged? Do you have any gut feeling as to where things might go?
Jim, that's a great question. We're encouraged particularly on what Justice Kennedy has been asking. There's a general thought that he is probably the swing vote, if there's going to be a swing vote. I honestly, maybe because I'm optimistic, I honestly think several of the people that are looked at as being traditionally liberal, I think they may switch over, but maybe that's just wishful thinking. But Kennedy, by his questions, seems to be asking the kind of questions that you would ask, like how can you, where in the law does it say it's a tax? When he asks a question like that, then that's a great question. And, of course, there was a poor answer from the government. So that kind of thing is encouraging to see.
What does the Commerce Clause have to do with all this and the arguments?
Yeah, Jim, may I read the actual Commerce Clause?
Sure.
It's real simple. Section 8, it says, Congress has the power to, and I quote, to regulate commerce with foreign nations, okay, that's number one, foreign nations, among the several states and with the Indian tribes. That's the whole clause. That one sentence, to regulate commerce with foreign nations, among the several states, and with the Indian tribes. Now, among the several states meant at that time, if they were going to trade tobacco and rum between Virginia and South Carolina, that the federal government could regulate that so that the states didn't tax each other.
Dan, you must not have the whole Constitution there, because I didn't hear you read anything about, and we may force the American people to buy a certain product.
That's exactly right, and that's the kind of questions we're beginning to hear some of the justices ask, because it's not in those words. And, years ago I read a story, and they said, what's the first thing they teach a young person going to law school? The first thing they teach them is how to read English, and that's what English says. They can regulate among foreign nations, among the several states, and with the Indian tribes. Nothing about an individual's liberty.
Do you deny the fact that something needed to be done in regard to health care?
No. AMAC really favors improvements in health care. As a matter of fact, Jim, if Obamacare is thrown out, we've got several different suggestions, combinations really of different plans that are already being put out there. The Heritage Foundation has put out an excellent option for Obamacare, and interestingly enough, it's based on the federal employees' medical care system. You probably know that the federal employees have their own medical care system, and it's run by private companies, and the federal employees have choices. Can you believe that? Now, and the federal employees are delighted with the kind of plan that they have.
So why should not the rest of the people have that plan?
Because the government doesn't control it. And there are people in our government who want to control. They feel they can better determine, how this country should be run than our free economic system. And it's crazy. It really is. I'll give you an example. The one thing that's happening is we're going to have a shortage of general practitioners, family doctors. As projected, and in 7 years we'll be 100,000 doctors short. So AMAC would add to some of these proposals that are out there that there should be drugstore clinics. Several months ago, I had an earache. It was a Sunday afternoon. My daughter called me and said, Dad, where are you going? I said, I'm going to the emergency room. She said, why? I said, I have an earache and the doctor's office is closed. She said, why don't you go to the CVS drugstore? CVS right now has a pilot program of 600 drugstore clinics in thousands of stores. So I went into one. There was a nurse practitioner there. In 20 minutes, I was in and out. She looked at my ear. She said, you have an infection. She gave me an antibiotic. Was sitting there. She said, what's your doctor's name? I told her. She said, I'm sending him an email. You should go see him in 10 days, and he'll check your ear to make sure the amoxicillin worked. I was in and out 20 minutes. It cost $60 for the insurance company instead of $250 minimum in the emergency room.
So you'd like to see more of these established then?
I sure would. And for other reasons, let's take Medicaid, where you're having poor people that don't have coverage. It's a very sad story. We were on vacation. My wife came home with my daughter. She had taken my daughter to an emergency room for a cut, and she was crying. I said, what's the matter? She said a little baby had died in the emergency room. And the nurses, who are used to tough stuff, they were crying. And one nurse was lamenting that it was a shame that the mother, who didn't have health insurance, didn't bring the child in sooner. Now, if that mother had a drugstore clinic card for $5, she could have brought in her child to the drugstore clinic and either had received antibiotics early enough, or if she waited too long, they could have rushed her to the emergency room. But the fact that she was afraid to go to the emergency room cost the life of her child. So that's another kind of thing we've got to do. We've got to replace the missing doctors, and the drugstore clinics is a very sensible, economical, free enterprise solution to the problem.
What about the issue of pre-existing conditions? I mean, we hear many a story about those who said, up until this came into effect, insurance companies would not accept us.
In fact, 7 states already, including New York, which is a large state, before Obamacare, they already had that in their laws that pre-existing conditions would have to be covered. What it did, it caused everyone's rates to go up a little bit. So the reason a lot of the states didn't approve this is because they didn't want to have more increase in premiums. But the fact is you can cover everybody. You just have to increase the premium to cover that.
Our guest here today on Crosstalk, Daniel Weber from AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. And we're opening our phone lines. If you would like to ask a question pertaining to our guest, his organization, their views here on the Patient Protection and Affordable Health Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, pick up your phone. Our number 800-733-9829. 1-800-733-9829. If you have a question about something that's been said, if you'd like to make a comment, our number again, 800-733-9829. And certainly here at Crosstalk, we encourage you to be praying for the Supreme Court, be praying for each of the justices, as there is an unprecedented number of hours that are being given to this case here, and many, many hours being devoted this very week here to this matter. And certainly we understand that by late June, it's believed that we're going to be seeing a decision that comes forth from the bench, though we understand the justices will be convening even late this week and rendering their decision amongst themselves, in which by which then the opinions will be reached. Is that your understanding as well, Daniel?
Yes.
Okay. Again, the number here, 800-733-9829. And I would like, if you would here, Dan, to again give us the website where our listeners can obtain more information about AMAC.
Thank you, Jim. It's www.amac.us.
Okay, and what will they find there?
Well, they'll find a whole host of information about AMAC, all the different discounts that members get, and the different programs that are available. Most of them are for Americans age 50 and older, but you can be any age and join AMAC, because that'll help us when we lobby in Washington. Do
you believe, as a whole, seniors are informed on this issue as to what this nationalized health care means for them in the future? They are better informed than most of the people in the populace. However, there are, I'd say, maybe half the seniors that kind of know what's going on, and the other half are really kind of at the mercy of the mainstream media. And what concerns you most about the media? Well, they have their own agenda. They're biased. They only report. People say, oh, well, the story's slanted a little bit, okay? For example, the headline could be slanted, and maybe one or two sentences is slanted. But the real thing is, it's who they choose to write stories about and who they choose not to write stories about. For example, it's known that the mainstream media is pro-homosexual, so they'll write articles about homosexuals. They are anti-military, so when is the last time you read an article about a hero in Afghanistan or Iraq, or a soldier doing a kind act for someone in Iraq or Afghanistan? So by selecting what they report about and what they don't, that influences what they do. We're going to take a quick 60-second break, and we'll come back immediately to your phone calls. I see the lines are all packed up, so get on board as you hear calls be responded to here on the air. Write down the number 800-733-9829. This is Crosstalk on VCY America. We'll be right back.
Are you on death row? One Christian film producer says everybody is. Every one of us will one day die. Then what? In a heart-stirring 30-minute DVD, film writer, producer, and director Dave Cristiano has released a penetrating on-stage drama that takes you inside a prison cell and captures the life of a man on death row who knows that in less than 3 hours he will die. Convicted of murder, he sits angry, guilty, and scared. At his request for a preacher, the two engage in a soul-searching conversation that is forever impacting. As an evangelistic tool, VCY America is making available Death Row, encouraging you to share with unsaved friends and loved ones. One copy is available for a donation of $8, or you can obtain a 4-pack of the Death Row DVDs for a donation of $20. This offer will expire at the end of March. To make your donation by phone, call 1-800-729-9829 and specify whether you want 1 or 4 Death Row DVDs. That's 1-800-729-9829.
You're You're listening to Crosstalk here on VCY America. Daniel Weber is with us today, founder and president of the Association of Mature American Citizens, AMAC. Their site is amac.us, amac.us. Well, let's go to the phone lines, which are all packed up here today, and we're going to begin in Pasco, Washington. Nancy, thanks for calling. You're on the air.
Yeah, question and whatnot, where Medicaid is concerned. A year ago, I couldn't work anymore, and I had to go on welfare a little bit, and before I could get on my disability and whatnot. And because now I make too much money from Social Security, because I'm 62, and now going through DSHS and whatnot, they say that I make too much money, and I'm on what they call a spend down. And I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but every 6 months I have to do for an eligibility to keep on Medicaid. But before Medicaid kicks in, I have to come up with $480, and that's every 6 months.
Nancy, do you have a specific question for our guest today?
So, what I'm wondering about on that, do you know anything about that, on that spend down and the Medicaid and how that works?
Yes, specifically, the only thing that I am clear on is that they are putting in, phasing in based on your income, making you contribute to the cost of the Medicaid. But again, this is what happens when you have government control. The government can make a rule, they can change it tomorrow, they can increase it, they can decrease it, and it's out of your hands. But the idea of what they're trying to do, from what I understand, and they're doing it to the military. I don't know if you're aware of that. They're trying to implement the same exact thing to make the military pay part of their money. And it's interesting to see what they decide to cut and what they decide to increase. Here we're giving Egypt, $10 billion so they can build mosques, but yet we don't have enough money that somebody is on Medicaid to keep their coverage. It doesn't make sense.
And, Social Security, when I went in to ask them about that and everything, they said, well, you got to be on this for 2 years before your Medicare can kick in, and then you'll automatically be on Medicare. Now, how does that work?
Well, Medicare is if you're 60. How old are you?
I'm 62.
Yeah, so I think they're probably telling you got to wait until you're 65.
But you don't get it at 64 because they said I have to wait for 2 years, and then I'll automatically.
Yeah, I'm not actually familiar with the integration of the Medicaid with the Medicare because of those recent changes.
Appreciate your call here today. We're going next to Arkdale, Wisconsin, and Tom, you're on the air.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. What I heard you saying was that the AARP is really in favor of Obamacare, which is really a socialist mentality, but we're already there because we have Medicaid, Medicare. We already have socialism. You're just trying to debate on how we're going to do the socialism, whether we're going to do it through this Obamacare way or we're going to do it through the other way, because right now we have is the younger people are paying for the older people's health care. And that's socialism, because the government is compelling me or anyone else to give money to the government. They take their cut, and then they pay for the health care, which is why the health care is so expensive, because the government is setting the cost for everything. Everything is based off the cost of Medicare.
Todd, Dan, your response.
Yes, well, I believe I agree with you partially. That's why there's plans like, for example, the Ryan plan, which, thank goodness, he revised it. It's much better, this new revision he came out with, which allows people to have a choice to say whether you're going to be under the government Medicare program or whether you choose to be under your free independent plan. Some of the candidates, like Gingrich, they have a similar proposal that comes in there and it helps change it. Now, believe it or not, it looks like, if the studies are correct, and we hope they are, the studies show that it will actually reduce the cost of medicine because people will shop. And like I don't know where you live, but we, in this retirement community in Florida, you have dental clinics that have ads on doing procedures for your teeth. where the people, most of them, don't have dental coverage, so they'll advertise, oh, we'll do a tooth implant, or whatever they call it, for $500, and somebody else says, we'll do it for $350. And that's the basis of how the free enterprise system will work, if they let it work.
You have to have point of service, and that'll bring down the cost.
That's exactly right.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate your call here today. You're talking about expenditures. I had a headline today. Obama requests $770 million to fight global warming overseas. So there we go again. Okay, to Mona in Florida. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. If the federal employees have a different private, different insurance than this Obamacare, and it's working, and they love it, why aren't they offering it to everybody else, is question one, and why are they not copying that for everybody else? And two, if the Obamacare does go, what happens to all of the federal employees? Is it optional for them, or do they keep what they have, or what are they offering?
It depends on, I'll answer your last question first, and that depends on whether they're union or non-union. And as you know, there's all kinds of options for unions, especially the government employees union. So they, from what I understand, they'll be able to keep most of their own plans. They'll be exempt. Getting back to why they don't expand it for everybody, well, I don't understand that either, because it gives people a choice, and there is competitive parts to it, but what it does do, it takes the control out of the government. The money actually in the federal plans is done by private insurance companies. And apparently the Obama administration feels they'd rather have this national insurance exchange that they're going to control. Eventually, there are people who say that the ultimate plan is to have a national insurance company, what's called a single payer. And if you read AARP, they seem to believe along the same lines. And that is ultimate government control, where it is all done through government, similar to Social Security in one way, but not quite the same.
Mona, all your questions answered?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for your call. We have a couple open lines right now at 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. To the state of Michigan, Gene, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I have a question because our insurance has been really climbing, and I just want to know if this is Obamacare. So I'll just read the numbers to you, and this probably is a factor. Mine went up from, let's see.
Well, yeah.
February 1st, it was $23.13 up, and then again, now April 1st will be $84.22. That's for my wife, and then mine is it's going to be up. It's going to be up.
Tell you what, Gene, we won't be able to go through all those numbers here in particular, but what about these cost increases here, Dan, that people are seeing? We're seeing actually increases across the board. We're told this was going to be the Affordable Health Care Act. Everybody's going to see a decrease.
That's exactly right. When the president was running for office, he actually used the number $2,500 was going to be the average reduction, and we find that was either a misrepresentation or he didn't understand what he was talking about. And there's a couple of reasons why insurance rates are going up. The biggest reason, of course, is the cost of medicine itself. MRI machines, that cost $1 million, things like that. That's really the biggest reason. We're having bigger and better hospitals. The hospital employees are being paid more, except the doctors. The general practitioners are not. But generally, now, however, there's a point of diminishing returns. It works the same way when you increase costs. Once you reach a level where you have most of the equipment, you have most of the personnel, you have the building, then you can begin to find economy of scale. So the right things to do are to take the government control away and replace it with the ability of people to choose. That we feel will do. That's the biggest single factor that you can do. I talked to a doctors group recently. And I said, what do you think the biggest thing, the most important thing in medicine is? And they said, free the doctors from filling out the insurance forms. And I said, what are you talking about? Doesn't make sense. And they said, don't you realize that takes away innovation. That if a doctor wants to try something in medicine, he can't do it because there's no code for them to do either a procedure or prescribe a different medication. They either got to lie and cheat the system, or they can't do what they want to do. According to this group of doctors, they said, let us practice medicine and we'll reduce the cost. And they are forming different groups to do that now, if the government keeps out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the main reason it's gone up is because our medicine has gotten better.
Gene, thanks for the call.
Okay, have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Medford, Oregon. Mike, you're on the air.
Yeah, I have a question about Obamacare. Nobody seems to be talking about what your income level has to be, what the penalties are. I mean, like a lot of people out there, even if you told them you have to buy this insurance, to say with what money?
Yes. Now,
so I'm just curious where
that's excellent point.
How that's going to work.
Now we get into the hidden parts of Obamacare. Now, one thing that isn't hidden is that, when you take into account your earnings, if your income is over $500,000 in a year, then you'll pay a 3% tax on top of everything. Well, if you sell your home, if you were smart enough to buy a home and then you pay it off after 30 years and then you want to retire and move to Florida, and let's say you're making $80,000 your last year and you sell your home for $420,000, the whole point is you could have an income over $500,000 and the government's going to take 3% of that. So that's one way that the government's going to collect money. As far as the actual rates, the rates are going to be determined by experience. They'll cut rates. They can cut rates simply by cutting the coverage, by rationing. Liam Neeson's wife died in a hospital, or died because she went to a hospital in Canada when she was injured while skiing. That hospital did not have an MRI machine because of the rationing in Canada. It wasn't allocated a machine. Had she taken the test, she would have more than likely, they would have found the problem. They could have saved her. So that's the end result. That's why they say some of these panels are truly death panels, because when you cut costs and you ration, yes, you can save money, but it's going to impact negatively the medical care you're getting.
That's what I was wondering, like a lot of people, that make less than $50,000, where are they going to come up with this monthly payment? Or if there's a monthly payment, is it a one-time fee? Is it a tax? Or?
Well, what they're going to do, they're going to push more and more of it to the states under Medicaid. Then you'll be eligible for Medicaid or some of these insurance exchanges, which they have not issued dollar guidelines. But the idea is they're pushing it into the states, which is like sweeping something under the rug that you really should be addressing right now.
Yeah.
Good question.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate your call here today. And, when those dollar amounts, the fines and everything else come out, just, put on your seatbelts and be braced for a ride here. Daniel Weber is our guest here today, and we're just seconds away from a break, so we'll go to that break and then come back to more of your calls that are coming in. Our number 800-733-9829. You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. In August of 2010, Glenn Beck held his Restoring Honor Rally in Washington, D.C. that included the unveiling of the Black Robe Regiment, a group of clergy from all religions, including imams, according to FoxNews.com. In the summer of 2011, it was his Restoring Courage rally in Israel that also had an ecumenical flair, I believe. And in the summer of 2012, it will be his next rally, Restoring Love. Will this Restoring Love rally be about embracing ecumenicalism and the social gospel? Will Restoring Love mean we are to set aside theological and doctrinal issues in order to win the culture war? I believe more and more Christians who refuse to compromise on what it means to be a Christian, who refuse to compromise on the gospel, who defend theological lines, are indeed going to be called unloving. But indeed, that's the most loving thing we can do.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America, and we're talking with Daniel Weber from AMAC. That's the Association of Mature American Citizens. Be ready to jot down their website. We'll have them give it before the program closes here, where you can obtain more information about them. But let's go back to the lines here from Fall Creek, Wisconsin. We have Vic calling in. Hi, Vic. You're on the air.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. I have two questions. My understanding of what I've heard about Obamacare, excuse me, are, and I'd like to throw these out at you to confirm if these are true. The first one being that the Congress and the President are exempt from Obamacare, and secondly, that Muslims are exempt. And I'll get off the phone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, second question hasn't been determined yet. There are provisions that Muslims could opt out of certain provisions in the plan, but just like the Catholics, they haven't actually issued the final guidelines. But there is because certain things, that Muslims is against their religion that could be construed to be in the plan haven't been decided yet. And the people from the Muslim faith, they don't even know what's happening yet, but that is a possibility. As far as the federal people, again, they're covered under the federal plan.
So they're exempted from it.
Unless, now again, they can opt out. There's all kinds of things that can be done, and that, in a sense, is nice, the flexibility, but who controls it? It's controlled by the Secretary of Health and Human Resources, not by the Congress. And that's the scary part.
All kinds of exclusions. We know a number of unions have gotten exclusions. And was it the state of Nevada and so on?
That's correct.
Wow. Okay, to Waniwak, and Jim, you're on the air.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. As an emergency room nurse, I was just wondering if AMAC or Obamacare, whatever it is there any way that they're going to be able to limit the number of visits? Because we have people, whether it be Badger Care here in Wisconsin, Public Aid, Medicaid, that abuse the care that they already have, where they're visiting ERs 20, 30, 40 times a year. How can we curtail that?
That's an excellent point. And we go back to the idea of the health care clinics and drugstores and having them pay a $5 copay. I have a friend of mine who is affiliated with an emergency room and said one of their patients faints and says she's having a heart attack, so the ambulance takes her to the emergency room if she has a cold or a cut or whatever it is, and then she doesn't have to hire a cab.
Oh, my.
And she has to take a cab to get home, but she saves a cab fare by taking an ambulance. And in that particular area, the ambulances are covered under the municipality. So she gets carted to and from the hospital. So that's exactly what we were talking about earlier. These are, now, if you have the government in Washington, D.C., some bureaucrat, wouldn't it be much better if the local person in charge of the ER, that person could make decisions and say, nope, before you can come here again, you got to go to the health clinic, see the nurse practitioner. Jim? Why take up and take somebody who's seriously ill, who needs emergency care, they're going to have to wait while somebody who has a minor illness or cold or something gets treatment? I appreciate that call. That's a great call.
Thank you, Jim. Miriam in Utica, New York, you're on the air.
Yes, I'm glad you have taken my call. My name is Miriam Tanner, residing at Utica, New York. I went last year, and I have to do it ever so often, to change the batteries because I have a defibrillator. I did it once at St. Elizabeth in Utica. And last year when I went to get the battery changed at St. Elizabeth, the battery changed at St. Luke's, my co-payment now is $6,000+. I'm on a fixed income since I came to this country. I was never on welfare, never on the unemployment line, and now that I've fallen sick, and so I don't know what's going to happen when this battery has to be changed again.
So, Miriam, are you on an individual medical plan or are you on the Medicare?
I'm on Fidelis. Medicare, I'm on Fidelis.
Yeah, so what happened is Fidelis changed their plan. Is it provided for you by an employer?
No, I'm retired. I'm a senior. I'm 74 years old.
Oh, okay. So your group plan at Fidelis was changed by your employer. So that's what they did to you.
I'm not employed, as
I meant, but you're covered because you're a retired employee?
Yes.
Yeah. So what happened is your company changed their plan to save money, apparently. They gave everybody a higher deductible. So your best bet is check with your human resources department at the place where you worked. Call your employer and ask them what their changes are. Because that's what they've done to you. They've changed your plan, and which is something that a lot of people anticipated would happen because of Obamacare.
Miriam, thanks for your call. Next to Ohio, and Barry, you're on the air.
Yes, I just want to make a quick statement. Obamacare isn't about health care at all. It's about control. And eventually nobody's going to have any of this health care if this goes into play. And what they're trying to do is funnel everybody into the government system and put the insurance companies out of business because nobody will be able to afford the insurance. And so everybody will be. It's all about control. That's pretty much what it is. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Well, you brought up a great point because I feel that's what the Supreme Court ruling will all be about. It certainly is that. It's about, can the federal government control an individual? For example, they're telling insurance companies you can't make a big profit. Well, then why would someone want to invest in an insurance company? And believe me, insurance companies 85% of insurance companies in America are owned by individuals. If you have a 401k, an IRA, a pension plan, a retirement plan, you own part of an insurance company. And for them to go after insurance companies like the president has is really short-sighted.
Thank you for your call here today as well, and we're down to just about 40 seconds left. Daniel, a final thought you'd like to leave with our listeners here?
Well, we are fighting for Americans age 50 and older, and we need to have AMAC grow. So we ask you, if you want to join a good fight, consider joining AMAC. Go to our website, www.amac.us. We sure can use the help. There's strength in numbers.
And as you take a look at this issue, in conclusion, Daniel, are you optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm optimistic. But I believe there's a good Lord that loves us all, and I believe God has blessed America, so maybe that's why.
Well, Daniel, thanks for being with us here today.
Thank you, Jim.
Daniel Weber has been our guest here, founder and president of the Association of Mature American Citizens. Again, that's AMAC.us. As today we've taken a look at Obamacare's impact on seniors. Thanks for joining us today here on Crosstalk, and be praying for the Supreme Court as they continue to hear this case and as they render their decision here in the days to come.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.